let's start with Devin Vassell. So we've got the total stats for the season. We've got everything that's happened this year. There's no more context and caveats as much as we mentioned some of it. We've got everything from this season.
Yep.
And I think what I would say, Ethan, let's pull up his career stats just so we can get full context. So obviously you have a 3-point drop off there in points. You do have a little bit of a percentage drop off in 3-point percentage. You have a 3-point percentage drop off in field goal percentage. Let's see, you did have a little bit of an increase in rebounding, about assist drop off, and steals and blocks actually increase a little bit. But yeah, what's your thoughts on Devin's 2024-2025 now that we're here officially at the end?
To give it a grade, Jude, I'd have to go C plus, maybe even C flat, because I mean the numbers aren't bad, right? These aren't bad numbers, but when you compare them to last year and when you compare them to the expectations surrounding Devin Vassell as potentially the second best player next to Victor Wembanyama, then it's rough. He didn't take playmaking strides that we thought he might take. The pick and roll chemistry he had with Victor last season diminished greatly. And then if you're going to make him just a spot up shooter, a 3-and-D guy, his 3-point percentage dropped off as well. And it kind of came up towards the end of the season. He finished at, like you said, 36.8%, but that was lower than 35 for a good stretch there. And then we tried to bring him in as a scorer, and then he became kind of inconsistent up and down. So when you zoom out and you look at this holistically, it was without a doubt a very disappointing season from Devin Vassell.
Yeah. I want to throw the injuries in there because I think that is a factor. But I think even with the injuries, as much as, it that can impact somebody coming back, players get injured every year. All-stars get injured every year. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Eventually they return to form. And I think a lot of the stuff that you touched on probably was, because of fit questions. A lot of the things that him not being as comfortable just as an off-ball shooter immediately next to De'Aaron, or even at the beginning of the season, next to Chris Paul. That wasn't something that, happened when we felt like that was something that was for sure going to happen after what we had seen from Devin in the past 2 seasons. But to just wrap up Devin here, because we've been talking about this really kind of the last 2 months of the season, him and Keldon specifically. I'm not out on Devin, and I understand there's a lot of things that happened this year, but this season made me reframe how I view Devin's ceiling. Coming into this season, we were talking about it. We felt like he could be the number 2. And maybe even if he wasn't a number 2, like he was for sure going to be like a number 2, 3, potential all-star guy next to Wemby with what we saw at the end of the year last year. And what we saw this year with not only just, CP3 and Harrison coming in and that kind of affecting things fit-wise, but also Stephon Castle's ascension. Again, I view him in a different light, ceiling-wise, long-term. Like we've been talking about at the end of the year, it's like maybe now I'm thinking, can he be in a Manu 6-man role versus being the number 2 and being the Robin to Victor's Batman, as we've talked about for years.
Yeah, I think reframing the expectation from Devin is 100% necessary, but then that also comes the conversation of his contract. Because we paid him for one thing, but if he's going to be something else, then we have to really analyze, is it worth it? Can we get that from elsewhere? But I still think, like you said, I'm not out on him. Let's give him next year. Let's see what he looks like with a fully healthy team and a full offseason next to De'Aaron Fox.
Yeah, and a full off season of chemistry, workouts, and all that stuff. Like I said, kind of when we were talking about this a couple weeks ago, I don't mean to just always move the goalpost, but genuinely, like there's still 24. You know what I mean? There's still a lot of the stuff that we talked about. Next year trade deadline. If we're still having the same issues, then there's just no rebuttal at that point. But yeah, I think that pretty much sums up things on Devin Vassell's season, Ethan. Definitely not out on him, not saying that he is untalented or anything like that, but the fit as well as the long-term framing is not the same. Maybe there's a chance that he can put everything together and prove us all wrong next season, but we can only go off of what we've seen.
Right on.
Let's move on to Keldon Johnson. Ethan. Obviously, these guys are probably two of the biggest hot topics when it comes to the roster moving forward and their role on it. So as you can see, a little bit of a decline in stats, obviously, again, at 12.7 points per game, 4.8 rebounds per game, 1.6 assists, pretty much the same blocks and steals, a little bit of an increase in efficiency overall, did take less shots though, and then a 3-point efficiency decrease in 3-point percentage. So this is one thing I will say, as much as the end of the season really stands out, when you look at the numbers here, and we talk about it with Keldon all the time. He does so many things that don't show up on the stat sheet, and we're going to give him credit for that. But still, this does kind of show how the beginning of the season was also a disappointment, as well, as you mentioned with Devin.
Yeah, beginning of the year was really, really rough for KJ. He was struggling to find his role in the team, playing next to, the bench unit and exactly what he was supposed to do. And that became very clear when he was forcing himself offensively. And then defensively, I think he improved, but, marginal improvement because of just who
Mm-hmm.
he is as a player. That's never going to be one of his strengths. But I do think at the end of the year, he improved probably more in my eyes than even Devin improved. And I know
Mm-hmm.
that's a lot of context. No Victor, no De'Aaron, and we're not exactly winning every game. Um, but I do think that he is probably going to be more comfortable in his role next year than he was to start this season. So we have to give him credit there. And also these stats, you may just look at them and think, they're exactly like his sophomore year numbers, but he's also averaging 24 minutes a game, whereas in his sophomore year, he had 5 more minutes and was starting a lot of those games. So I think it just took him a while to kind of find that niche. So I'm also not fully out on KJ. I know I'm a bigger fan than most people. I have his jersey over there. But I'm also willing to give him the start of next season.
It's so this one if you're going to come at me and have a conversation about this one and be on the other side of things and you're going to reference the numbers, I honestly don't have a counter argument for you. Like I
Mhm.
can feel where you're coming from if you're just saying he underplayed the contract, his production is underselling. I hear you. But I think again and again I also understand if somebody comes out and says, well, what you're about to say and reference that Wemby and De'Aaron weren't even playing. But I think what we saw from him at the end of the year, I know those guys weren't there, but he was playing around the guys that he's mainly going to be playing. As much as the bench will look a little bit different next year, that is the part of the rotations that it was most accurate when it comes to next season.
Right.
He just looked so comfortable, man. Like it's hard to describe, but obviously, we just brought up the 29 or the 23-9 game that he just had against the Raptors. He had multiple 20-point games. He had multiple, like we said, post All-Star break, around 15 points. Everything that we wanted Keldon to be, as much as there were, like a handful of not great games, but even some of those not great games, like we mentioned, were in wins. It was because he didn't need to impose himself as much. But like I said, everything that we want to see from Keldon in that off the bench role, not even necessarily as a six man, but just as an energy guy coming in off the bench, almost. I mean, he's not a defensive guy. I was gonna say Tony Allen. That's not accurate whatsoever on the court. I'm trying to think of a juice energy bunny rabbit. Who's a good example there, Ethan?
A juice energy bunny.
Patty Mills. I could say that because
You could
Patty wasn't really the six man,
you
not
could
play
say that.
style, but just in energy that he brings. Obviously, he is not shooting threes like Patty, but that's so off in the weeds. The point I'm getting at here with Keldon, what we saw from him at the end of the season is everything we want to see from him off the bench on the actual, rotations, if that makes sense. And because it just looked so good in that stretch, it gives me hope. And maybe that's because we're too attached. But I think also, again, that the value he brings to the locker room, I think isn't talked to how much the Spurs value that probably isn't talked about enough.
100%. As a leader, he's incredibly valuable, and he's the guy they put on the microphone, dude, every single time. And I know, I mean, how much of that do you value
Right.
monetarily? Maybe not that much, but I mean, I value that as a Spurs fan. And he makes, I think, yeah, he makes 1 million more than Harrison Barnes. I know they're completely different players in different stages of their career, but statistically, they're almost the same, except one's obviously a shooter, and one gets to the paint and is a high energy guy. So I mean, it's just a matter of taste, and you need both roles to win games. So I'm fine with his contract, even more so than Devin's, because Devin makes 10 more million, and I'm pretty sure KJ's is front loaded, so it's only going to get
Exactly.
more valuable with time. Um, and if we want to reanalyze it next season in February and decide that trading him's a better route, then I'm fine with that. But I still think he deserves the start of next year.
Yeah. I'm with you there. Again, not to just always agree on everything, but these guys are kind of they're basically the same age, they're from the same class. That's me and Ethan's timeline on them. If we're having these same fit issues next season,
Hmm.
barring some big offseason trade where they're included,
Right.
then at that point we'll be like, okay, we love these guys, but obviously, it just the on-court fit just didn't work out long term.
Right on.